couple of housekeeping items for those that may not be familiar with how we work. First of all, I would ask that you silence your cell phones so that we don't get interrupted during the meeting. And second of all, the way the process works is city staff will present on an item. The commission will ask technical questions. Once we're done with technical questions, we open it up to the public for public comment. And if you have a public comment or question, we ask that you step up to the microphone and clearly state your name and address so we have it for the minutes. Also, just a reminder to the commissioners, we went through a workshop after the last meeting on some new procedures as to how these meetings are going to run. So if I seem a little lost, that is probably why. But Mina gave me a very nice cheat sheet here so we can follow the process that we were supposed to follow it. But before we get to that, we still do things the old-fashioned way with roll call.
All right, Kathleen Propp,
Here.
Ed Bowen, Steve Cummings,
Here.
Michael Ford,
Here.
John Hintz,
Present.
John Kiefer, Robert Weigert,
Here.
Thomas Perry,
Here.
Andrew Mott,
Here.
Derek Roth,
Here.
Thomas Voitai.
Here. Moving on to approval of the minutes from February 19th. Do we have any additions, corrections, deletions, et cetera from those minutes?
Move approval. Second.
All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody opposed. Motion clearly passes. Let us move on to item number 1, commercial design standards variance to allow a commercial building not predominantly clad in Class 1 materials and access control variance for reduced lateral clearance and driveway spacing at 831 North Washburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request is for two separate variances. One is a commercial design standards variance for a reduction in Class 1 materials, and the other is an access control variance for reduced lateral clearance and reduced driveway spacing. So the subject site is located here on North Washburn Street on the west side. It's about an acre and a quarter in size. The applicant is proposing to redevelop the site for a new commercial use, which will be a discount tire. The property is zoned SMU. It's currently vacant and recently had some residential buildings raised there. So here is an aerial view of the site. To the north, we have the Dick's Sporting Goods site, and to the south, we have the bar. So for the design standards variance, the commercial design standards require that facades have at least 50% of the facade devoted to Class 1 materials. And this variance will apply to the north and south facades. The east facade already is meeting that standard with 70% Class 1 materials, and the west facade is exempt. It's a rear facade, not facing the street. So the north elevation is about 12% Class 1 materials, which are mainly brick, veneer, and glass windows, with the remainder of the facade being primarily split-face CMU, which is a Class 2 material. According to the applicants, providing additional Class 1 materials on this facade would change the corporate standard finishes and trade dress. And also they note that most of that north facade is not visible due to the adjacent building to the north, which is Dick's Sporting Goods. And the most visible portion of this facade is the glass showroom area, which is mostly the Class 1 material. And as for the south elevation, this one is about 30% Class 1 materials, which is mainly brick, veneer, and glass, with the remainder being used for the overhead doors and split-face CMU. The applicant notes a hardship here because they need to use these overhead doors, which need to be a solid material. So that's a hardship where they can't meet that 50% standard. Staff is in support of this variance, as we feel it'll still be an attractive look, with most of the area that's not meeting the standard is less visible from the street, along with the hardship for needing these overhead doors. And for the access control variance, they're requesting a reduced lateral clearance. Code requires 75 feet, and they're proposing 44.8 feet. And they also need a driveway spacing variance. They're proposing on the north about 109 feet, and on the south about 67 feet, where code requires a 125-foot spacing. For the lateral clearance, the applicant notes that they need this variance to allow for truck maneuvering on site. Staff is supportive as they still provide enough lateral clearance for stacking of 2 vehicles, Also, it's consistent with neighboring properties, especially the property to the south, which only has a 20-foot lateral clearance. As far as spacing, they cannot feasibly meet that 125-foot spacing requirement because there's only about 217 feet between the neighboring driveways. So staff is supportive of that, as the driveway appears to be in an appropriate location based on the layout of the site. So with that, staff recommends approval of the variances for the commercial design standards variance for reduction in Class 1 materials, as well as the access control variance for reduced lateral clearance and reduced spacing.
All right, great, thank you. Let's take a step back here, because a couple things we were supposed to do that we did not. First of all, do we have any site inspections to report in terms of somebody going out there to take a peek at this? Okay. Second of all, will we accept the staff report as part of the record? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now, let's move on to technical questions. Go ahead, Thomas.
So what are the surrounding buildings in terms of their Class 1? Do we have any idea?
It's got the pet place, Hicks,
Yeah,
and then
Dick's-
the bar.
Dick's will likely be mostly, Dick's will likely be mostly, Class 1 materials.
I think we had a conversation about them when they put that up.
Yeah, they did.
Dix has class 1 kind of on knee wall,
Yeah.
and some in the center. Around it, and
That might have been, was that developed
that was
pre-2017?
developed prior to the current code where these requirements would not have been in place. And then here would be the front of the Dick's PetSmart buildings, which, without getting too close of a look, I would say likely don't meet that same 50% class 1 material because they were developed under the prior code.
And then the bar to the south is an older.
Right, it's very likely the bar doesn't meet it.
The bar has a decent amount of glass, but I doubt it's sufficient to actually meet that that 50% requirement.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, if anybody here from the public would like to speak to this item today, you're more than welcome to do so. If you would just step up to the microphone, state your name and address, we would appreciate it. Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, public comment is closed. Back to the board discussion.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion? Yep.
This variance doesn't concern me. I think they have good reason to use it, and I'm going to,
Oh, hold on a second, what?
Well, we were talking about the motion to approve needs to include adopting the staff report and the findings.
We already did that.
You have to adopt the findings within the statute.
That way you don't have to make separate findings. This is new to,
All right.
we're learning as we
So-
go along here.
Can we do that by voice vote?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt the findings of the staff?
Staff, yeah.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
aye.
All right, clearly passes. Back to Kathy.
I'm,
Oh, you're done? Any other discussion on the motion, which is already on the floor? All right, let's call the roll.
Okay. Ford,
aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Weigart,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Groth,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Voitek.
Aye?
Motion carried 9-0.
Okay. All right, number 2 is specific implementation plan for community living arrangement located at 3851 Jackson Street. Do we have any site inspections to report? Seeing none, do we accept the staff report as part of the record? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? No? Okay, now, your turn.
Thank you.
Your turn. Brian.
So this site is located on Jackson Street, north of West Snell Road. It's a vacant site that's approximately 4.5 acres in size. Surrounding areas consist of mostly commercial and residential uses, including neighboring residential to the west and north. Here's an aerial view of the subject site. A conditional use permit and general development plan was approved in August of 2018 for a one-story, 52-unit community living arrangement and assisted living facility. Here's the proposed site plan. The final site plan shows a one-story, 53-unit assisted living facility. 14 of the units will have potential for double occupancy, with all other rooms being single occupancy. The building itself will be about 40,000 square feet in area, and is designed to fit between wetland areas. The total impervious for the site will be 41.2%. Access to the site will be provided with a shared access drive on the along the south lot line coming from the neighboring commercial use. A cross-access easement will be required for the shared access drive. For parking, they have 24 striped parking spaces provided in front of the building, as well as 17 spaces on the south side of the building. And a base standard modification was approved as part of the GDP to exceed the maximum parking. And these 17 extra parking spaces are to accommodate visitor parking. The base standard modification was granted to allow for 40 total parking spaces. The SIP site plan shows 41 spaces, but staff does not have concerns with the additional stall. The loading area as well as the dumpster enclosure are located on the southwest side of the building. The driveway in the front yard, as proposed, will be 45 feet wide, and that additional width is needed to support delivery truck circulation. Staff is supportive of a base standard modification to allow this increased driveway width. The code-required pedestrian and bicycle access and required bicycle stalls have not been provided on the final site plan, but that can be addressed as part of site plan review process. Public Works informed the applicants that they will have to collect and convey their stormwater on site. There is a stormwater pond on the site plan to the north of the building. The final stormwater management plans will be approved during the site plan review process. The landscape plan, there are a couple of changes that need to be made to meet landscaping code requirements. For the building foundation requirement, they'll need to move some of the building foundation plantings to the front of the building to meet that requirement. Also, they will need additional landscape points along the street frontage, so they'll need more landscaping points along the front property line. As far as the buffer yards, requirements are for the west and north property lines, as those are residential districts. To meet that requirement, they will need to provide more evergreens along those property lines for buffer yards. Along with the evergreens, they are proposing 6-foot-tall solid fencing to assist that buffer yard requirement along the west and north property lines. They're also proposing 5-foot-tall coated chain link fencing around the stormwater pond, some of which is going into the front yard, so they'll need to adjust that as chain link fencing is not allowed in front yard areas. But this can be addressed during site plan review as well. They did submit final signage plans, which is a 6-foot-tall monument sign, which has roughly 18 square feet of signage area on it, and that does meet SMU signage standards, and they will need a building permit for that signage. Here's the photometric plan for lighting, most of which is compliant with city standards. However, the front driveway area, some of that is under the required 0.4-foot candles for circulation areas. And again, that can be addressed during site plan review. Here are the proposed building facades. The city does not have requirements for institutional uses for design standards, but we did compare what they're doing to multifamily design standards. The building is primarily clad in a mixture of stone and wood fiber siding, and the elevations do appear to meet multifamily standards, and staff feels that the facades provide sufficient articulation and window area. And staff recommends approval of the SIP with the conditions that they're a base standard modification to allow a total of 41 parking spaces, a BSM to allow a 45-foot wide driveway in the front yard, cross-access agreement is required for the driveway entrance to the site, and landscaping and lighting plans must meet base code requirements.
Thank you. Technical questions? At what point in the process do you verify that their landscaping and lighting meets the requirements?
Permit issuance.
Okay.
Site plan review.
Site plan. Other time, yes, Thomas.
So I understand that these types of facilities are definitely needed now based on the demographics of the population out there. 15 years from now, projected to be a huge glut in these types of facilities, and a lot of them becoming empty. And I would strongly urge the city to look at that plan 15 years from now, because there are going to be a lot of these are going to be the strip malls of the future, so.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, is anyone here from the public to comment on this item today?
Ken Koskowski with Ganther Construction Architecture, the architect representing the potential purchaser of the property, and we're just here with the civil engineer and myself to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for the petitioner? As long as he's here in front of us. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? All right, public comment is closed. And discussion.
Motion first, then discussion.
Make a motion to accept with the base standard modifications as stated.
All right.
And finding.
Can do that after we,
It is part of the motion. So your motion
Combine.
will
Oh, I'm
be-
s-
You have to have a two-part motion.
I'm saying the following conditions, I'm sorry, of the standards that recommended,
and the findings within the staff report.
and the finding within the staff report.
You couldn't have said that better.
And I will second.
it's been moved and seconded.
Now discussion.
Now we have discussion.
I know, we gotta,
Motion, yeah.
I didn't have time to look at it.
Discussion. All right, seeing none, let's call a roll.
Ord,
Aye.
Hint,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Groth,
Aye.
Prop,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-0.
All right, let us move on to item number 3. This is a public hearing for a conditional use permit request to establish a pet grooming business at 1691 Ohio Street. Any site inspections?
Yes, I drove by.
All right. All those in favor of accepting the staff report as part of the record, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, let's go on to you guys.
Thank you.
3 in a row.
This is a CUP request for a pet grooming business. As the property is zoned neighborhood mixed use, commercial animal boarding and daycare is a conditional use in that district. Here's the subject site. It is located at the corner of West 17th Avenue and Ohio Street. The site includes a residential unit on the north side of it, and then a vacant commercial unit on the south side of it. The commercial unit was recently used for Designer's Edge Studio. The surrounding area is predominantly single-family uses, along with some commercial uses to the south and west. So here's an aerial view of the subject site. So again, the building to the north is a residential unit, and the part to the south is a commercial unit. The applicant will also be the owner of the house, and they will occupy the house as well as the commercial unit, and they will operate the business with no additional employees. They're expecting about 20 pets per week to begin with, and it may grow up to 40 pets per week. To start out, it will be by appointment only. They're proposing no changes to the site. They did state that every pet taken outside from the business will be on a leash, and there will be no pets left unattended when they're outside. The site does have 4 existing parking stalls, including 2 parking stalls alongside the commercial unit. Staff is supportive of this conditional use permit, as the pet grooming use is a relatively small-scaled operation, and it should not be detrimental to the surrounding residential uses. And here's a street view of the site and an aerial view of the site. And staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit for a pet grooming business as proposed, with the findings in your staff report and the condition that all animals must be leashed when outside and may not be left unattended.
All right, do we have any technical questions for staff on this one? Right?
Just one, and this is one that kind of popped into my head because I guess I would count as actually having driven by the place because I live in the area. But when they're bringing in their pets and dropping off their pets and whatnot, is there ample room there for it to be safe? I mean, I know there's the place that's over on the corner of South Park and Main, and they at least have an area you can drive into where you're on the property. Everything's on the street. Are they going to have a parking area where they can drop off animals at, or is this going to be?
They do have the 2 parking stalls alongside the commercial unit, whereas in the.
And that's probably something, the petitioner will probably want to address too, as far as if that's what they're going to do, because it just seems kind of odd, especially in the wintertime, when you're going to have all that snow out there trying to get the pets around out there if you're parking on the street.
Doesn't snow here.
What's that?
It doesn't snow here.
No, never. Only in February.
Any other technical questions? Okay, as this is a public hearing, we need a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion to open public hearing.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, if the applicant is here, we would appreciate if they have anything to say, come on up and tell us what you know.
I will be the owner of the business. And to answer your question, yes, I will be using the side driveway for people to park and then come and walk up and bring their pets inside. And then I also have a pretty long driveway myself on the other side, and they're more than welcome to park in that space too, as I only have 2 cars. So
You're going to, okay.
So they're going to be able to,
ride
yep,
off-street.
they
Yeah.
can be off-street, yep, if they prefer to park on the street. I mean, they're more than welcome. I'd prefer they parked on 17th over Ohio, but
Right.
mostly in the driveway, yes.
Could you state your name and address so we have
Oh, Sydney Todd, yes.
address?
807 Bayshore Drive, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, 54901.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, so the way this works is you can go sit down if other people.
Not yet. I have a question.
Oh, pardon me, we have a question from Kat. I'm sorry, Kat.
Pet grooming, an animal is just there for an hour or 2.
Yep, well, it could be up to 4 hours depending on the dog, but the parent is just going to drop the pet off, leave, and then come back to pick it up. So no one's staying at the building. They're just dropping their pet off to me, I'll groom it, and then they'll come pick it up between 1 and 4 hours.
But it's not daycare.
No, it's not a daycare, it's not a boarding, there is no boarding at all in this. It's just grooming. You drop your dog off, I groom it, and then you pick it up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for the petitioner, as long as she's with us? Okay, so if we may need you to come up
Okay.
later if you.
Sounds good.
Anyone else here from the public to speak to this item today? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And unless you have more comments, we're good to go. Okay, so thank you. And then commission action.
I'll make a motion to adopt the staff report as findings and approve the condition use permit with a condition.
Second.
All right, let's call the roll.
Okay, Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Kiefer. Oh, sorry, Weigert,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Gross,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Wojtek.
All right, aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Do we have any discussion? Okay, on to item number 4. Approval of a specific implementation plan amendment to allow 2 new electronic message center EMC signs at 501 East Parkway Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, sir.
So item number 4 is for the Boys and Girls Club at 501 East Parkway Avenue. They came through the Plan Commission late last year, or if you don't recall. What they did was they rezoned their site, and they received approval of a general development plan, so a GDP, and a specific implementation plan, SIP, with conditions. I think all of you approved it at the December 18th, 2018 Plan Commission meeting, and then the City Council approved the GDP and SIP at the January 22nd Common Council meeting. They're coming back today to, they're requesting basically a plan development amendment for 2 EMC, electronic message center signs at their property. Here's the subject site outlined in blue here. Kind of see it's now newly rezoned institutional plan development. And then there are a number of single and 2-family properties, residential properties around the site. You can kind of see here on the east here, and then if you look on the north, down on the south, there's a few mixed uses. There's some residential properties, a few commercial properties, and then if you look, you have the railroad right here to the west, Broad Street to the west there, then the railroad, I should say. And then across the railroad, there are some additional residential properties. Just kind of giving you some of the site context there. Here, aerial of the site, you can kind of see the site layout. So I'm sure staff went over this before, but here is the Boys and Girls Club complex here. Here's some parking on the south, the ball field here, and these will be important buffers that we'll get into in a minute here, as far as the signage. And then some parking on the north, the main parking lot on the north off of Parkway there. And then they received approval to expand their community garden, create a community garden, expand their play area and such. So here is what they are proposing. Essentially, and this plan is oriented, so I believe north is facing to the left here, Parkway over here. Normally we try to point north up, but just the way the plan is set up, it's a little bit difficult, so it's oriented this way. So their first EMC would be here on the north entrance sort of awning there, or I should say canopy there. Right there on the edge, and you'll see a perspective of that in a minute. The southern EMC is located in the recess, of the facade here on the south end of the building. They're both, I think, the same size. So they're both about 17 inches by 99 inches. So if you can imagine, just a little bit under 1.5 feet in height by a little bit over 8 feet in width. Two EMCs together would still be under the ordinance maximum of 100 square feet, well under that. You can kind of see here, here's what they're proposing on the north. And it would just be text here. And basically the intent of these EMCs is really to inform people that are visiting their site. So when they get into the parking lot and they're walking towards the building, they can be informed of events, hours that the facility is open. It's really not intended to inform motorists that are driving along the street. The size of the EMCs and the placement, they're not really intended for that. You can kind of see here on the south end of the building, so you can see how the recess of the facade here would kind of screen from view, as I'll get into in a minute, some of the properties on the east, their view of this. So really it's meant for people, like I said, coming into the building. You can see the entrance there or over here as they're walking along towards the building there. What I did was took the GIS map, and I did a quick sort of visual here, which tries to illustrate some of what I said in the staff report. So you can kind of see, basically applicable ordinance restricts where these can be placed in relation to residential parcels here. There is a 100-foot minimum code requirement that they have to be away from residential parcels. They have to be at least 100 feet off of these properties here. You can see here, and I tried to hit on it in the staff report, they are all at least 100 feet, well over 100 feet in pretty much all cases. Property on the north is 200 plus feet away. The railroad and Broad Street are an important buffer here. And then the property to the immediate south is across the ball diamond and almost 300 feet away. These properties here are probably the closest on the east. Technically, I think the closest one is maybe 130 feet away, but would have no way of viewing that EMC because of the recess of the building. So you'd have to actually be at a further angle and be further south to see it. So staff recommends approval of this SIP amendment with the findings here and with the following conditions. So a base standard modification to allow 2 EMCs, really the base standard modification is for the number of EMCs, I should say, excuse me. Ordinance allows 1 on the site. The base standard is for 2. In accordance basically with the locations provided by the applicant, so on the plans and shown on those perspectives of the building. No additional freestanding or on-building signage shall be installed without applying for and receiving approval from the Plan Commission and Common Council. No modifications made to other aspects of the site. This SIP amendment is only for signage, only for the EMCs. And then the EMCs would meet all ordinance standards for EMC signage as explained in the zoning ordinance.
All right, thank you, sir. Technical questions on this one? Thank you for the visual, by the way, with the distances.
Oh, you're welcome.
Most helpful.
Yeah, actually, I was just curious, do we have I don't know, was it the luminescence or, how bright the signs are gonna be? Like, are they gonna vary for day and nighttime and that kind, like we've had with the other signs?
They have to, yes. By ordinance, we have the provision in there that requires them to be auto-adjusting based on the lighting out
Okay.
there. Yep, so
Thank
they
you.
have to do that.
Guess you
Right, Andrew.
probably covered this as well, but do they scroll? Or they?
We can confirm with the applicant. I know that they will obviously change. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if they flash or if they scroll. I can't remember. But they do have to comply with, because I know we have that provision in the ordinance.
Well, I believe the ordinance doesn't allow it to
I
scroll.
don't believe we allow scrolling.
Okay.
It can be static changes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Question. Other questions? Okay, is the applicant here, and do they have anything they'd like to share with us? Come on up,
We
sir.
haven't disclosed if we have,
Oh, pardon me. Do we do site ins?
I did drive by the site.
Jamie Wilcox with the Boys and Girls Club, 350 West 14th. My question to you guys is, again, not knowing the regulations on the flashing or scrolling or something, I guess I'd like that question answered too, on your part. Here, our signs are meant just for our people driving up. With the weather that we've had lately and the coldness that we've had, kids are coming up to the door and having to get in, and if we have this sign right there saying, hey, we're closed for the day, that's going to be very helpful for us. And the two signs, again, where physically we have 3 addresses on our property. So we have a 532 Broad, which is their teen center, and the teens come in on that side, so they need to know what's going on that side. And then our 501 East Parkway side is the 6 to 12-year-old kids that they need to know too. And a lot of the reason why we placed them where we did is parents drive up, drop off their kids, and then they come into the building that way. And this way they can see, hey, we're going to close at 6:30, we're going to close for the day or whatever, close early. Or if we have a special event, it'd be even nice to, hey, we're having a carnival that night. So that's why we want that, instead of having it on the door like we've had in the past, where they have to come up to the door and see if it's open or closed. So.
Questions for the petitioner? Thank you, sir. And
Well, the question that we had on the scrolling.
Okay, hold on.
Message and non-text images shall not change appearance more than once every 10 seconds, and transitions between message shall be instantaneous.
That-
Okay. No scrolling, it's just got to.
Be up for at least 10 seconds, change to a new message.
And then what was it has to downsize at night or something?
So electronic message centers will be equipped with a photosensitive equipment which automatically adjusts the brightness and contrast of the sign in direct relation to ambient light. So all of these type of signage have a photo sensor in them that at
Sure.
night they change the
And I'm sure the
brightness.
sign company, just tell them that and they're going to figure that out, so. All right, thank you.
Anyone else from the public here to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir.
My name is Dan Rylance. I live at 602 East Parkway. I'm a neighbor to the Boys and Girls Club. They're a great neighbor. We've lived there 20 years. I have no objection to the signs at all. If you would, I would just like to talk a little bit about the issue of the neighborhood. The issue in the neighborhood is traffic on East Parkway. The kids walk there from Webster Stanley at 3 or 4 every afternoon, sometimes on the street, and then the bus from north comes there at 4 o'clock. 50 kids get off, and then at 6 o'clock they go back into their places. So it's a very busy place. It's a wonderful institution. I have no objections. There's no law enforcement on that street. There is a hump on the 500 block. We call it the roll-off hump, if you're interested. Anyway,
Gotta be known for something.
it's not a deterrent if you're going west. People like to speed up to it and then go over the hump and get a little thrill. If you're going from east to west, or west to east, you wait until you get over the hump and then you speed up until you get down to Bowen. So it's kind of you'd be surprised at the traffic speed on that street. So I'm just a concern, the neighbors are not, they're a great neighbor, they made major improvements on their site for the last 20 years. The site just will make it easier for people to get there, but we're concerned about traffic and safety on East Parkway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this issue today, or item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. And do you have any additional, okay, he's good. Commission action, motion to adopt a staff report as findings and approve the plan with conditions. Do we have one of those?
So moved.
Yes, it's, you mind being the second? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Let's take the vote.
Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Carey,
Present.
Mott,
Aye.
Grohl,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 701.
Any further discussion? I have to say, when I first hear electronic signs, I'm thinking it's gonna be, but this actually makes perfect sense for what they're doing. Yeah, it just make sure you read the whole thing, that's all it is. Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought we just voted on it, and I
We
thought
did.
we were out of order.
I
did have a comment.
Yeah.
That I feel better about the signs because they're butted up against the building.
Yes.
They were sitting out like a monument site, I would not be very happy, so I'm happy with it.
All right, if we're ready, let's move on to item number 5, public hearing. Zone change from heavy industrial district to heavy industrial district with plan development overlay. Approval of a general development plan and specific implementation plan for an industrial building addition at 2661 West 20th Avenue.
We have to make a motion to open public hearing.
We're not there yet.
Not yet.
Thank you.
Okay.
Site.
We'll get through this.
Okay, any site inspections?
No.
Do we accept the staff report as part of the record?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we go on to staff, present
Thank you,
your
Mr. Chairman.
We'll get it eventually.
We're doing well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a rezoning request for the existing heavy industrial to heavy industrial with a plan development overlay. This is being necessitated by the request for a building addition on the south side of the property. So here we have the existing land use map up. As you can see, the subject parcel along with the properties to the south and the west are industrial in nature and part of the industrial park. To the north and to the east, we do have residential properties. So here is an aerial of the subject parcel, and I will be referencing this later in the staff report. But as you can see, the industrial user to the west, industrial user to the south, single-family residence to the north and east. So the applicant is proposing a little over a 6,000 square foot building addition. This building addition is necessitated to help a growing business expand within their current location. They need the additional square footage to add approximately 2 more, we'll call them machine bays to the existing facility. This would allow that business to grow in place. In order to achieve that needed width of the building for those 2 machine bays, they are requesting for baseline modification to reduce their south property line from the 25 feet required to 14.5 feet. Now, as this is a industrial user to the south, staff does not have a great concern with reducing that setback. The applicant has proposed to add 12 arborvitaes 10 feet on center along that south property line to kind of mitigate the impact of a reduced setback. Staff taking a look at this has actually come up with a little bit different of a plan that we would like to suggest to the applicant as well as Plan Commission. If you go back to the residential, the aerial photo, you can see there's a residential property to the east, along with an approximately 80-foot wide gap of no landscaping. Staff is suggesting we take the 12 trees as proposed, which staff feels is a sufficient amount of additional landscaping, and kind of reallocate them. Put approximately 8 of those trees along this 80-foot wide stretch to basically help mitigate the impact of an existing industrial user adjacent to residential, and then put the 4 additional to help screen that south property line with the reduced setback. We feel this is probably the most impactful way to use this additional landscaping because the impact to that southern industrial user is relatively minimal, even though we are reducing that setback. So kind of here are those 12 arborvitae as shown, and this is kind of the area. Now, we do understand we need to work with the applicant a little bit on this. There's some drainage, swale, and stuff going in there. So we are proposing that the final landscaping plan be approved by the Community Department of Development, just so if we do need to tweak a little bit to make sure we're not, impeding an existing drainage swale, that we can modify a little bit. But I think the Plan Commission can understand what the overall goal of that reduction is. Here are the building elevations. As this is less than a 50% addition to the building, all the code requires of them is to have basically a substantially similar look to the building. So the existing building is a ribbed metal building. The applicant is intending to match that ribbed metal building in both texture, color, and material. So it does meet those requirements for the building. With that, staff is recommending approval of the rezone, the general development plan, and the specific implementation plan with the findings listed below, along with the findings in the staff report. Base area modification to reduce the rear property line from 25 feet to 14.5 feet. Final stormwater management plans be approved by the Department of Public Works as part of the formal site plan review. Initial drainage plan was provided. Public Works does have some comments and some changes that will need to be made, but that can be addressed as part of the permitting process. And then finally, that the final landscape be approved by the Department of Community Development.
Thank you. Do we have any technical questions regarding this particular item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. If anybody has anything to say, please, now's your opportunity. Please step up and tell us your name, address, and what you think.
Howard Fluter from Cadre Incorporated, Fond du Lac, representing the applicant, the property owner. And as far as the landscape modifications are concerned, the property owner has no concerns about that reallocation of resources. And here for questions.
Any questions for the petitioner? Congratulations. Well, if you want to expand, it's a good thing, right?
Well, congratulations to the property owner.
Congratulations. Expansion's good.
We're looking forward to it.
Is anyone else from the public here to speak to this item today? Okay, then public hearing is closed. I'm guessing you guys don't have anything else to add to this? All right. And now?
Chairman.
Yes.
I believe this is out of order. It should say commission action and D, motion, E, second.
Right.
And then
That's
F,
what
commission discussion.
Correct.
And then vote and roll call.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and that's not anything the chairman did.
No, thank you. All right, so commission action. Do we move to adopt the staff report with findings and approve the zone change and approve the general development plan, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Yes.
Second.
All right. Then discussion. We have discussion on this. Seeing none, call the roll.
All right. Ford,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Weigert,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Groth,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye.
Boytek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Item 6 is a public hearing. I got this right. Zone change from suburban mixed use to multifamily residential 12, and approval of a conditional use permit for a group development for multifamily located at 1400 block of Osborne.
All this stuff comes into play.
So, do we have any site, well, I'm just looking at, this is all we
Yep,
have.
sorry.
Okay. We have site visit comments?
Yes. I drove by, and I want to state for the record that we have no information
Yeah,
on this.
I was just gonna say that.
Plan Commission has no information.
Correct.
Okay.
100%.
I've also been past the site a few times, so.
Do we accept the memo as part of the record? This is the memo.
There is no official staff report for this item.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
So that's where,
Now,
gonna do
staff,
a little bit of
up to you.
explanation along with this
Yep.
memo.
This is unusual.
This is a little unusual how we've done things. Although working with the applicant and the neighbors, we felt this was the best way to move forward. Just based on the way filings work along with legal publications. The applicant made an initial request for a rezone and a conditional use permit. Subsequently, they held a neighborhood meeting at the request of staff. We require these type of uses to always have a neighborhood meeting. The way the timing worked, our legal notices had already went out saying we were having a public hearing for this today by the time we were able to gather all that information from the neighborhood meeting. So we have to have a public hearing, but staff did not want to provide a official staff report because we were still in discussion with neighbors and the applicant about modifying a site plan to hopefully get to something that the neighbors can be on board with. So we've chose to continue with the public hearing that we're required to, and we're gonna go over the general site plan information we have, hold the public hearing, see if we can get some additional information from the applicant and the neighbors, and this will subsequently come back in the next hearing with the typical full set of plans, staff report, all of that. So the site is located on the north side of Osborne Road, just west of Mason Street. There is an existing multifamily apartment development adjacent to it, residential to the north of it. Site was currently zoned suburban mixed-use district, which does not allow multifamily by right. So the applicant's requesting to zone change that to MR12. Within that MR12 zoning district, they'll be required to get a conditional use permit. Any kind of development has more than 3 buildings. It's what our code requires as a group development. All group developments require a conditional use permit. So the conditional use is related to the number of buildings, not necessarily specific use. So here's just an aerial of the site. So this is the original concept plan that was shown at the neighborhood meeting. That neighborhood meeting took place on, I think it's in my memo to you, February 21st? Correct, February 21st. So it originally showed 6 12-unit, 2-story apartment buildings, 2 located along the south property line, and 3 internal along the proposed retention pond, and 1 to the north side of the site. Some of the primary concerns that were held during that neighborhood meeting were this structure. This structure was approximately 30 feet off the north property line, and there's a relatively substantial, several foot, grade change between the subject parcel and the neighborhood to the north. The neighborhood to the north sits significantly lower than the subject parcel. So there was a great concern about the impact of this structure on that neighborhood. So applicant took that information that we talked about during that neighborhood meeting and has since come back with this version of the plan. So they've went from 6 proposed buildings down to 5 12-unit buildings. In doing so, they've had to modify some of their stormwater management practices. Previously, they had a driveway going out to Mason Street through an ingress easement that has been removed and is now just conceptually shown as a sidewalk. And the buildings went from approximately 30 feet to the closest building to now approximately 125 feet. The building, there is a residence here to the west of the subject parcel, and from that property line, the building is approximately 70 feet. The MR12 zoning district for 2-family structures has a setback requirement of 10.5 feet. So just kind of for reference, from a side yard, they're at about 70. And that same grade change that exists here also exists here. There is a substantial grade change from this western property to the subject parcel. So to kind of give you a little bit of context, here is those plans side by side. The buildings have shifted south. Applicants showing a kind of landscape berm area to the north here. There is a water easement along with water lines that kind of cut through this corner of the parcel. Here is kind of the current site plan overlaid on an aerial photo so you can see. So here is that adjacent residence to the west in conjunction with where this kind of northeasternmost building is. I know that those neighbors are here today. I'm sure they'll have some comments for you, but just to give you reference, so here's where the berm has been. This is a berm and setback about 125 feet now. This is about 70 feet to this neighbor property. This white line you can see in here is the water easement with water lines. And then finally, we do have the current version of the landscaping plan. So obviously a buffer yard is required between single family zoning and MR12 zoning. So the applicant is showing a buffer yard screening along the north and west property line, and then some other landscaping throughout the site. And again, as this is a public hearing only, There is no official recommendation. We'll just have the public hearing and then see what additional maybe modifications to the plan can be made before it comes back next.
All right, still shows technical questions. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Technical questions.
How is the density?
The density falls far below the requirement. I ran it when it was the 12 units, or excuse me, the 6 buildings, and it was coming in at like 8.8. Since then, it's been reduced further, so it's significantly under the unit density that could be allowed there.
Just one point that I want to make on this too. The reason why we're at the zone change at this point is related to that whole thing the legislature did to us a couple years ago with conditional use permits, where they made us pretty much accept, if we have a district that has a conditional use permit in it, we have to approve it if the applicant is willing to accept all of our conditions. If you can recall, we went through and we amended the zoning ordinance to rip out all those uses that we thought we didn't want to have them as a conditional use and have to accept them by right or by conditional use. So in the SMU district, the suburban mixed use district, we took out a lot of the mixed use options in the mixed use district. So there's really no residential left anymore in the SMU. That's why they're requesting the zone change at this time, because it used to be in this district as a conditional use permit.
I guess a couple other comments. I think Mina did hand out some additional documentation we received. 2 letters, I believe you received from one of the adjacent property owners. 1 letter prior to that original concept plan, and then 1 letter related to the second concept plan.
That was from Joe and Carol Furlow at 1230 Devonshire.
And again, that is the property kind of located here to the northwest.
Other technical questions?
Do we have a sense of where that northern, I wouldn't say detention basin, but swale flows to eventually?
This is a landscaping berm.
Oh, it's a berm, okay.
This is proposed as a multi-tiered landscaping berm, not detention.
All right.
Kathy?
You said there was a water easement. Is that what that double line? That
Yes, this double line that you see here is a water easement with
And what does
with
that?
water
What
lines
does
in
that
it.
mean?
There
Is it
are,
an open?
no, there's water lines running
an
underground.
underground water line. Okay.
Right, Steve? Drinking water.
Drinking water line. Okay. Got it.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing. First, I'd like to request a statement or information from the applicant, if you'd like to. Come on up.
I don't know if you, we have some material here tonight. This is a rendering of the building.
It'd help if you were close to the microphone.
Sure. Okay. My name is Sarah Hillenbrand. I'm with Premier Real Estate. We're the development firm that has completed 2 projects in the last 4 years here in Oshkosh. The first is Soda Creek, which is off Jackson, and then the most recent is called Oregon Place down on the south side of town. So through both of those, the construction of both of those developments, we've had a wonderful experience, and it's demonstrated firsthand the need for apartments in the community. Down at the Oregon Place site, we had every building 100% pre-leased the day it opened. So the day we received certificate of occupancy, we had 12 people lined up to move in. So that truly demonstrated firsthand the demand for more multifamily here in Oshkosh. Obviously, thank you for the great introduction, Mark. We had a neighborhood meeting 2 weeks ago, and we're very pleased. We had a great turnout. And the neighbors were very forthcoming with their opinions, and we were pleased to have had them share that. That's the whole point of it, obviously, to work collaboratively and try to meet their needs and be good neighbors, and that's what our goal is in every development we do. So, in light of their feedback and obviously the concerns about primarily the northern property line and the proximity of that building to their homes, we truly took that feedback to heart and went back to the drawing board and redesigned our site and tried to come up with a solution to make as many neighbors as possible happy. So obviously we expanded that boundary from where our buildings end to the north property line and inserted that landscape buffer to try as best we could to, make it as maintain the serene environment they have as best we possibly could. We also eliminated the drive that ran out to Mason Street, and we just replaced it with a walking path in efforts, again, to minimize the impact on those neighbors. So, in any development, you're not going to make 100% of the neighbors happy. We did our best to try to appease the 10 lots on the north property line. And, we truly want what's best for the neighborhood, but this plan that we're proposing here is our second shot at what we think is a feasible plan.
We may have some questions for you. Do
Sure.
you have questions for her? Go ahead, John.
Your boundary that comes along here and along to there, is that end at like the furlough property line, on the south end of their property line, or is that, I'm just trying to get a feel of where this line's ending.
Yes. Yep. We've extended that landscape tree line to basically the end of the furlough property.
Okay.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sure. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Oshkosh typically would require the tree line to go along the true property border. But we are, again, trying to be very accommodative to the furloughs and give them as much space as they currently utilize, trying not to cut into the yard as they currently use it. So we have amended kind of what we're looking at as the property line to be as accommodative as possible to them.
Other questions for the petitioner?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yep, having just seen this, not being able to read this diagram very well.
Sure.
I'm looking at this northmost building, of course, and there is parking along your west driveway, parking along that line. Is there, what happens in this west of that?
Sure. So so all the front doors to the units, and this might be a little helpful to look at the rendering, the front doors to the units where you actually would walk into your apartment are on the long stretches of the building, and then the shorter side of the building is the garage ends. So that area that you pointed to would be just where 6 units would have garages. So people would be pulling, towards the building into their garage at that location.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions for the petitioner? Okay, you ready to come back if we need you?
Sure.
All right, thank you. Other folks here to speak about this?
Oh, sure.
Oh.
Can she ask or not?
No, that's not how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can come up.
You can come up and state your questions here, and then she can come back later and answer them if you have them. So who's here to speak to this item today?
Cindy Smith, 1345 Kensington. I'm on the north side there. And you said the driveway was out. Is that going to be a cement sidewalk or a walking path? Oh, and also on the berm, how high is the berm? And then how far is that going to end from my property line? And is there going to be like a dugout so that the water can run off rather than run into my yard? And is this still a couple feet up that you said before, or has that changed? And then the buffered screen, I'm not sure I understood what that was.
She can answer those questions later, but
Okay.
make sure you get them
Thank
out
you.
there. Okay. Anyone else here to speak to this item today?
Joseph Furlow, 1230 Devonshire Drive. I'm here with my wife, Carol. Sarah mentioned the 10 folks that kept happy. I guess we're the 11th. But in fairness, I want to start, first of all, by thanking Sarah and Jim and Darren and his staff. This is, in many ways, a really devastating thing for us. And they have been very attentive and very good about reacting, not just to me, but to the folks at the neighborhood meeting. That's not my issue at all. I want to thank them, and it's precisely because of their willingness to be creative and helpful including some of the, what Sarah referred to as what we're used to being our backyard, which isn't. It's all described in that first letter. They're terrific. It's because they're that creative that our request is really that we take one more look at this before we put a final proposal, and I'll try to explain. Sure. First of all, these are lovely looking buildings, but this is my serene environment right now, and I'm no PowerPoint expert, but under the new placement, not the original placement, but under the new placement of the buildings, that's my serene environment now. I'm not here to try to stop this. I just want people to understand why this is so important to us, and what it might do to our property values, not to mention our lovely backyard. Now, we're all working really creatively to find a solution to this. And you've got two letters. The first letter I wrote early on, then we had the neighborhood meeting, and Jim was great. Jim caught me coming in the door and introduced me to Sarah. We sat down and we talked in advance. I have no complaints. In fact, I'm grateful, as I know Carol is. Then we went through the meeting, and all of our neighbors to the north, and of course the distinction, obviously, we're to the east. There is no fence. There is no. We're just open to the site, I can't speak for the neighbors to the north. I don't propose to do that. But there's been a great adjustment. And I wonder, could I impose upon you to put the two side by side? That one. What happened that's significant and caused me to write the second letter, you'll notice that when the building at the north was taken out, the other building shifted to the north. And so what used to be, as I looked out my back door, a building over here became the side of a building here. And that's when I felt I needed to write a second letter, just because I've seen the creativity, and in my mind, in my lay mind, and I'm sure there are reasons, I don't know what they are yet, but in my mind, I thought, well, why not just take out the north building and leave the other buildings right where they are? And then it's still over here. And there's a, and what was landscaped directly out our back door remains landscaped directly out our back door. And that's the kind of discussion I want to just entertain as we go forward. That said, I again need to acknowledge I am super appreciative that the view from the front with the mature trees is kind of still there in this plan. I don't want to seem ungrateful for what you have done. I simply want to ask you to go back to the drawing board on that other part of it. So that's why we wrote letter 2. And letter 2 is a request basically just for future conversation, for someone to come and see this view from on site and see what the issue is for us, what the concern is from there. And to see if we can find a solution that maybe moves the building back over that way and keeps things going there, and allows us to move forward. And have I left anything out, dear? Okay, thank you. I have to face her later. When we moved to Oshkosh, it was the intent to move for the duration. When we bought a house, it was the intent to buy the house we'd retire in. And I remember we got down to 2 houses 5 years ago, 6 years ago. One was on Lark Street, Lark Avenue, Lark Place, Lark. It was on Lark, and then there was a house on Devonshire. The house on Lark was nice. It was a nice ranch house, big fenced-in yard, needed some work, and we were prepared to do that. And the house in Devonshire was at the back of this beautiful, quiet cul-de-sac with woods on 3 sides of the yard. It's the place where I de-stress all summer with my grill and my beverage, like most Wisconsinites. And all things considered, we bought that house as much for where it was and how it sat as for any other reason. And since we bought that house, we've invested $40,000 in improvements to that house with the intent that it's our forever house. I'm not anti-progress. I understand the issues. And I'm not stomping my feet and saying this can't happen. And again, for, I don't know, the fourth, fifth time, we are super appreciative of the understanding, which I think is probably above and beyond what has to be done, and the help of planning, which is probably above and beyond what needs to be done. But I think, again, in my lay point of view, there is still one more tweak that can happen that makes it win-win all the way around. And all I'm asking from all concerned is that we have one more opportunity to address not just the property to the north, which is which is being talked about a lot, but that one property to the east. And I think at that point, then I'll know I've done everything we can. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Okay, would you guys like another shot at this? Come on up, sir.
My name is John Moss. I prepared the application on behalf of the property owner and Premier, the prospective developers, for the rezone and for the conditional use permit. The reason I gave you hard copies of the plans today, because they're work in progress. That second one, which was the landscaping plan that shows some detail to the proposed tier berm in the back, wasn't in that format until about 12:30. I printed it and brought it along, and sometimes hard copy sheds a little bit more light on what we're proposing there. Before I get into that, the first part of the request is for a rezone to multifamily from what is currently zoned. If you look at the property and you get out there, you'll see the quarry is to the south, not a very attractive development there. You have institutional to the west. You have multifamily existing to the east. And you have residential to the north. This is a fill-in and to the northwest, excuse me. This is a fill-in with a transitional use of multifamily, which is perfect for this setting. To transition from the quarry and the institutional to the first family with multifamily already to the east. I believe it is consistent with your comprehensive plan. So from a rezone perspective, I think staff might support that when they produce their staff report for your meeting on the 19th. To address a little bit about that berm and the other landscaping that we have there, the berm is proposed to be tiered, not just a pile of dirt, consistently one layer. It's going to be 8 to 12 foot high with the tiers planted in black spruce. So the big concern of the neighbors were that we have a balcony on the second story of these buildings, which is about 16, 17 foot high. You put a 6-foot person on them, they could see into the back part of the buildings of the neighbors to the north. But basically what we've created here is 4 tiers of buffer. They have about 70 feet in their backyards that's landscaped, and they have quite a few plantings, mature plantings. Then they have a 6-foot fence. 8 feet away from there, we were proposing as part of your code requirements for a buffer yard, hedge-type plantings, which will grow over time and close to maturity about 5 to 7 years from now. We'll create another buffer about 10 to 12 feet high. There's 6 feet on top of what's already the fence. You go back about 40 feet, 45 feet, and you get to the top of that tiered berm. That's about 8 to 10 feet to 12 feet high, and the plantings are black spruce, which will be at planting 6 foot high, and at maturity could be as high as 30, but let's say 20. So, I mean, you're looking at all of this tiered buffer that we're trying to create there. And I think we've done a pretty good job, and Premier should be applauded by removing one building in allowing that to happen. We're proposing that buffer yard be constructed in the northwest corner to be on the west side of that water main easement. That would require permission from staff because that's a deviation from a code requirement where it has to be put with its drip line at maturity within 10 feet of the property line. If we had to put it on the property line, in order to do those plantings, we would have to remove most of the vegetation in that corner to get to that location to plant them. So we're proposing, and approved by staff, we could create this buffer further to the east and allow that northwest quadrant that's currently being used kind of as an extension of their backyard to remain undisturbed and allow it to continue to be used as possible. I think that's a pretty good effort effort on the part of Premier to do that. To talk about the lot, it's not the most attractive lot. It's probably the worst, or one of the worst lots we're looking at redeveloping into a multifamily. At the neighborhood meeting, many of the neighbors, made us aware of the potential for petroleum contamination in the soil. That's real, and there's an expense associated with dealing with that, which we will. There's also, since we had the neighborhood meeting, we had a chance to do some backhoe test pits. There's like 5 to 6 feet of fill in a lot of areas of that former blacktop plant property. That's going to add an additional cost to having to develop it. So, a lot of times have to stress to people that when we look at a piece of property like this, it's a brownfield. This is the greatest and best use for that property, R3. It's the type of use that can maybe absorb some of those expensive things that have to be done, that if it isn't developed the way it's shown on that site plan, it's highly likely it'll never be developed again in any of our lifetimes because of all those extra costs, and most other types of developments can't incur them into their budget. So with that said, I'd answer any questions anybody has. I don't know if I was specific enough for.
Start with John. And just for public comment is closed, so now it's back to us.
On the northwest corner beyond where you're putting this boundary on, the mature trees that are in there, how tall are those trees right now?
To me, I was in there, they're probably 30-some feet. They're not, I mean, it might be box alders or willows or something.
Yeah, there are, may I answer?
Sure, go ahead.
There are, to the west of where that's showing, there are probably 4 to 6, that's right on the line where we might lose some of those. There are at least 4 or so trees that run along the property line that are oak, and they're quite tall. And then at the very top northwest corner, there's like a grove of trees, and it kind of is a buffer between us and the house around the corner on Kensington, a couple of houses on the corner. And so I don't know what type tree they are or how they work, but keeping that vegetation there is a win, certainly.
Oh, yeah. For everybody.
For everybody.
So back to John.
Yeah, that was one of the things because I was wondering how far down along. I'm trying to. It's hard when we don't have lines, with it when we're looking at the property right there.
Their east lot line's 155.5 feet from our northwest corner. We're extending those buffer plantings all the way for that 155 feet to the south, even though it goes in a diagonal area for a while. But we're covering that entire area. And again, that's subject to, we're proposing it as part of our landscaping plan. It would be a deviation from your normal requirements are for landscaping. So even though we propose it, doesn't necessarily means it's going to be acceptable and approved.
But trust me, we all understand what you're trying to do with this.
Yeah. Well, the other comments that were brought forth that we haven't talked about at the neighborhood meeting, the lady that is here that talked about the size of the berm, was concerned about us having to trim some of the more mature trees that are on the private property that overhang the fence because they are large, and they do that. With this proposal, we won't have to trim any of those trees. We can construct the buffer yard plantings and build the berm without having to do anything. So we've eliminated that. You didn't want the pond in the backyard, so we haven't relocated the pond. There were people against the driveway going out Mason Street because it'd be in their backyard. We've eliminated that. We tried to take into account as many of the concerns as a neighbor as we could as we tweaked this thing.
Could you
If-
address because Mr. Furlow had said something about just, why not just remove one building and leave the plan the way it was before? Is that just because you're trying to solve some other problems? Like the driveway?
Absolutely. If you look at the second one, what we're trying to do there is we're creating a bigger buffer from the transmission line towers that are in the front because we had to reconfigure the site plan. That green space that we've created in the front there that we have as a berm if necessary is one of the better areas of the site we can borrow some clay soils from that aren't fill. Likewise, the north area behind there where we're putting the berm, we're gonna end up borrowing on site by digging a hole and taking some of the clay out of there. The rest of the site, pretty much within the footprint to where you see the buildings in the pond, is the area that's been identified as fill. So there were a number of factors that went into the development of the ultimate site plan.
Other questions for the petitioner?
Yeah.
Yes, Kath?
Thank you for this. And because we haven't seen it, we'll have to absorb it. And I will be asking at the next meeting, or the staff can help flesh it out, about just what this northwest corner, this whole thing is going to look like. You've described it, you've tried to describe it, but that's going to be one of my primary concerns. And then how far down on the west side, you've got, call it an arborvitae hedge or something like that.
Correct.
Why doesn't that go further south?
It goes to the
Or-
southern portion, the southern lot line of their lot, which is our obligation under your zoning code requirements in landscaping is to have that buffer yard extended wherever our property abuts first family residential or whatever the equivalent is.
Oh, okay.
So
to
that's,
extend it a little further is above and beyond code.
it could be done. It's one of these things, we could propose it, but it would overlie the existing water main.
Well, yeah, we
If
don't-
they
we
have
can't
to
do that.
repair it, that's gonna be lost, we wouldn't want the responsibility to have to replace it, but we could extend the arborvitae
No, we
buffer
can't-
yard south of
Can't
there.
cross a water easement, if that's where it is, so.
We would have preferred to put it in a different location, but that water main, the way it's situated, just makes a natural buffer for us to leave the stuff to the west of it undisturbed if we can by creating that buffer yard just on the west side of that easement. But again, that's subject to the
Okay.
review of staff and approval to do that, because it's different from what's currently in your zoning code.
All right, any other questions for the petitioner? Thank you very much, sir, really.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, now it's time for commission discussion. For my
No, it's
little
not,
list
it's
here.
time, no, that's all right, we don't have a motion.
And we're not voting on it.
Well, I think I registered my principal concern. Next question is a technical one for all of us. Since we've been told that we can no longer do things like go out and look, what is legal in terms of our either individually or collectively going out to the furloughs if we're invited?
You're permitted to look, you must disclose it at the start of the hearing so the applicant is aware of it.
Okay. So it need not be 8 or 9 of us, if it can be whatever,
Individually, yeah, you can go out
it
there.
can be an
you,
individual
just
thing if the furloughs are so inclined. Okay.
However,
All right.
it can't be 8 or 9 of us at the same time.
That is correct.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Or
And
one
have
or
a meeting there.
both way.
Well, it could be 1, 2, or 3 because that is not a walking quorum.
Well, you become a negative quorum, so if there's 2 and there's only, well, if there's 3, and we only have a simple majority of 5.
Oh, that's true. So 2 would be okay?
Just hold up there.
All right.
Let us
Other
check the
discussion
manual.
points
Lord.
as Mark looks. Other thoughts, guys?
Wish Amy was here.
John?
I just want to say that I don't know what it is with our planning department, but it seems like we've been getting a lot of developers to actually work with us, and I want to tip my cap to you guys because honestly, we've seen this a lot in the 10 years I've been on here, where we've had developers who have just altered things. Like, I mean, go back to CVS. Look at how much that changed from the first time. Yeah, it's amazing. And we see this time and time again, and it's great to see that developers are actually working with city staff instead of sitting there and stomping their foot and walking away. So
I would second that and say, having worked with some construction stuff in a past life, all design is problem solving. And I appreciate that this effort has been made here. We have other thoughts? So what's gonna
Thank
come
you, John.
before us next time?
No.
So, assuming
The routine process will be followed next time. We're going to, when we come back, you'll have the full staff report like you normally do, and then we'll open things up for public comment. It's,
we will not be holding the legal public hearing because we have satisfied that requirement of the state code. However, we will still open up to public comment like we
Yeah,
always
like
do.
always.
So the hearing is going to look basically like this, except you're going to have your normal staff report, your full set of drawings, and we'll open it up for public comment. We've just fulfilled the requirement of holding our public hearing.
Other thoughts from us?
That's it.
All right. Anything else before we go into a brief hopefully brief workshop?
no.
We have a motion to.
Motion
Motion to adjourn.
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're done.
Well, thank you for bearing with.